Okay, so chapter 16 picks up the following morning. Fliss! Hey, Fliss! Someone was shaking her roughly. She opened her eyes to find Marie grinning down at her. Come on, lazy bones, you're going to be late for breakfast, and it's the Abbey today. She pulled the covers and turned her head away. Leave me here, she mumbled. I just want to sleep forever. You'll write apologies forever if you make us late. Everybody else has finished in the bathroom. Some have gone downstairs. Bathroom. Last night. Something she said she'd do. Oh, crikey. She threw back the covers, leapt out of bed and grabbed her towel. Listen, Marie, will you do me a favour? What? Make my bed while I get washed. I'm supposed to see Ellie Mae. I wanted to catch her before she went downstairs. Please. Okay, Marie smiled. Just this once. Go on. Fliss ran across the landing, forgetting in her haste to check the linen cupboard door. She washed rapidly, splashing a lot of water about. Doesn't seem 2 minutes since I was here before, she thought. When she returned to room 10, her bed was neatly made and Marie had gone. She pulled on some clothes, dragged a comb through her hair and headed for the stairs. 8:05. Breakfast was at 8 o'clock. Ellie Mae would be in the dining room by now, and with no empty place at her table, Lisa and the boys would be cursing her for being late again. The third floor landing was deserted, which meant that Trot and Gary had gone down. The next floor was Ellie Mae's. Fliss ran down the stairs and nearly bumped into Mrs. Evans and Mr. Hepworth, who were talking in the doorway of room 4. She slowed down and tried to creep past, but Mrs. Evans said, Stop, Felicity Morgan. Come here. Yes, miss. Yes, miss. I'll give you yes, miss. What time do you call this? 8:05, miss. Nearly 6 minutes past, actually. And what time is breakfast? 8 o'clock, miss. Exactly. So you're 6 minutes late and you were running. Why were you running, Felicity? Because I'm late, miss. Don't be cheeky. You've broken 2 rules already. Mrs. Marriott will be in the dining room. Tell her Ellie Mae's not well and that Mr. Hepworth and I will be down in a minute. Have you got that? Yes, miss. Off you go then. And think on. I'll be watching you, Felicity. She hurried on down. She didn't run, but her mind was racing. Ellie Mae's not well, and there's 2 teachers outside her room. She's in bed then. That means I won't get to talk to her. So what do? Keep quiet about last night? Or tell the teachers? Tell, I suppose. Everybody was eating cornflakes. Trot gave her a dirty look as she walked in. Mrs. Marriott was sitting alone at the teacher's table, chewing watchfully. Fliss delivered her message and was sent down to the kitchen to apologise to Mrs. Wilkinson for being late and to ask if she might have some cornflakes. As the woman shook cereal into a bowl for her, Fliss said, There's an old woman who sits in the shelter across the road. She seems to be there all the time. Who is she? Mrs. Wilkinson smiled, pouring the milk. You must mean old Sal, she said. Sally Haggerlythe. She's mad, I'm afraid. Got some sort of bee in her bonnet about this place. Mumbles on about fate and doom and dread and I don't know what. I'd steer clear of old Sal if I were you. Fliss said nothing, but thought it might be interesting sometime to have a word with mad Sal Haggerlythe. She carried her cereal bowl to the dining room and slipped into the only empty place. None of the other 3 were at her table, but 2 tables away sat Gary, facing her. He was looking at her with an expression which was angry and questioning at the same time. She began mouthing at him voicelessly, exaggerating her lip movements and pointing to the ceiling. She's in bed, she mouthed. Sick. Didn't get the chance to talk to her. She spread her hands and palms upwards and shrugs. What do we do? Gary might have been good at all sorts of things, but lip reading wasn't one of them. He glared at Fliss, scowling and shaking his head. She began again, even more slowly, stretching her lips and jabbing at the ceiling, then bent forward, goggle eyes, clutching her throat and shooting her tongue out as if puking into a bowl. "What on earth's the matter with you, Felicity Morgan?" Mrs. Marriott was looking at her as though she was a lunatic. "She's lost her marbles, miss," said Gary, and some of the kids sniggered. "Nobody asked you, Gary Bazzard." "Well, Felicity?" I had a bit of cornflakes stuck in my throat, miss. It's gone now." "I'm glad about that," said the teacher acidly, "because, you see, the rest of us have finished our cornflakes and Mr. Wilkinson is waiting to clear so that Mrs. Wilkinson can serve sausages and bacon before they go cold." "Yes, miss." She spooned the cereal into her mouth and chewed, keeping her head down. Everybody was looking at her. She could feel their eyes. She ate distractedly, thinking about Mad Sal and the whispering voice of her dream. It seemed like hours before her bowl was empty. When everybody had finished breakfast, Mrs. Evans stood up and said, "Now, I want you all to go back to your rooms and get ready for our walk. We're running a bit late, so you haven't got long. I'd like everybody in the lounge kitted up and ready to go by 9 o'clock. What time did I say, Felicity Morgan?" 9 o'clock, miss." "Right. Table 1, off you go." Felicity's was the last table to be dismissed, but the others were waiting for her outside Gary and Trot's room on the 3rd landing. "What was that pantomime you were putting on for me down there?" demanded Gary. "I couldn't make head and tail of it." He was holding the giant stick of rock which he'd sucked almost to a point at one end. He sucked it now as he gazed at Fliss. She shuddered. "I don't know how you can," she said, straight after breakfast. Mrs. Evans and old Hepworth were by Ellie Mae's door when I came down, so I didn't get the chance to see her. That's what I was trying to tell you. "The point is, what do we do?" said Lisa. Trot looked at Fliss. "There's nobody by Ellie Mae's door now, is there? The teachers are all downstairs. You could go and talk to her, like you were going to." Fliss shook her head. "The other kids are there. She wouldn't tell me anything in front of them, would she?" "I reckon we're just going to have to tell about last night," said Gary. "She was poorly yesterday, and now she's worse. Who knows what will happen if we keep it to ourselves? I think you should go to Mr. Hepworth, Fliss." "Why me?" Gary grinned. "He'd never believe me. Nobody does. But he'll believe you. And anyway, the whole thing was your idea, wasn't it? Keeping watch and that?" "All right," Fliss nodded. "But I still wish we could have talked to Ellie Mae first." She found Mr. Hepworth in the downstairs hallway handing out packed lunches. There was a queue. Fliss tagged on the end. When he got to the front, she took the little packet he offered her and said, "Sir, can I have a word? It's about Ellie Mae." "What about Ellie Mae?" Kids were waiting in a line behind her and he was anxious to give out the rest of the lunches. "It's about what's wrong with her, sir." "And what's it to do with you, Felicity?" "Sir, I think I know why she's ill." "Indeed. It's Dr. Morgan now, is it? Go on then. Why is Ellie Mae ill?" "She goes into the cupboard on the top floor, sir, at night. I heard her on Monday night and David Trotter saw her, and last night 4 of us kept watch and she went in again." Mr. Hepworth looked at her. "Are you trying to wind me up, Felicity Morgan? Ellie Mae Sunderland's a sensible girl. Why on earth would she be creeping around in the middle of the night getting into cupboards? I've never heard anything so daft in my life." He smiled thinly. "Just as a matter of interest, who were the 3 who kept this watch with you?" "Lisa Watmore, David Trotter and Gary Bazzard, sir." I thought Gary Bazzard's name might crop up. He put you up to this, didn't he?" "No, sir. We saw her, honestly. There was a 13 on the door, and it's not there in the daytime. The teacher's lips twitched. And somebody lives in the cupboard. Am I right? Let me guess where he might be. He looked at the ceiling for a moment and then slapped his hands together. I know. It's Dracula, isn't it? Fliss gazed at him appalled. Do you really think it could be, sir? Mr. Hepworth looked at her. The smile faded from his eyes. Good heavens, Felicity! I do believe you're serious. Somebody's frightened you half to death, haven't they? Now, who's been telling you stories, eh? Gary Bazzard, was it? No, sir. It's not a story, honestly. Will you have a look at the cupboard? The teacher sighed, gazing at her now with sympathetic eyes. All right, Felicity, I'll have a look, and you'd better look too. A cupboard's just a cupboard, as you'll see. He looked along the line of waiting children. Wasim, come and give out the rest of these lunches, will you? Sir. Together they climbed to the top of the house and crossed the landing. Fliss hung back as Mr. Hepworth twisted the doorknob and pulled. Nothing happened. Locked, he said. You pulled, sir, said Fliss. Try pushing. There's no point, Felicity. The door opens outwards. Ellie Mae pushed it last night, sir. But that's impossible, Felicity. It's made to open outwards. You can tell by the hinges. Get the key, sir, please. He sighed. If it's locked now, it must have been locked last night. I think you had a nightmare, Felicity. You dreamed you were watching, but you were asleep. Dreams can be very real, you know. But I'll set your mind at rest. I'll go and ask Mrs. Wilkinson for the key. Wait here. She waited till he turned on the half landing and passed from sight, then followed quickly, seizing her chance. The door of room 4 was closed. Fliss twisted the knob and pushed gently, praying that neither Mrs. Evans nor Miss Marriott were in the room. They weren't. The room, like her own, contained a double bed and a pair of bunks. Ellie Mae was in the bottom bunk. She lay on her back with her eyes closed. Her face was almost as white as the pillow. Fliss knelt down and touched her shoulder. Ellie Mae, are you awake? It's Fliss. Ellie Mae's eyelids fluttered. She rolled her head towards Fliss and mumbled, What? Oh, it's you. I thought everyone had gone out. What do you want? I want you to tell me what happened in that cupboard, Ellie Mae. I want you to tell Mr. Hepworth too. Ellie Mae's eyebrows puckered. Cupboard? On the top floor. You went there last night. We saw you. No, she shook her head. Nowhere last night. Here. Not very well. Flu. Mrs. Evans says tablets make me sleepy. Give me dreams. What sort of dreams? She tightened her grip on the girl's shoulders. Ellie Mae, what sort of dreams? Ellie Mae grimaced. Horrible dreams. Dark house. Empty, I think. Stairs. Lots of stairs. And a room. The room of... Oh, I forgot. Why don't you go and leave me alone? I'm going back to sleep. She rolled her head towards the wall, and the movement exposed the side of her neck. Fliss's eyes widened, and she almost cried out. In the pale skin under Ellie Mae's ear were 2 spots of dried blood. Okay, we will leave that there. 2 spots of dry blood, what's the your immediate association, the first thing that comes into your mind? Surely not. Surely we couldn't be looking at vampires. Or would that not be too predictable? Or could that be true? Okay, super exciting stuff. Right, guys, you've got some tasks to do today in your to-dos to think about the chapters that we've read. So I'd like to have a go at those and think about the story, which is getting really exciting. Okay, as always, we're around today to ask any questions if you need us. So good luck with those.